Hi there, I'm Kimiko, Key for short, and I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer who served in Lesotho as an education volunteer from 2010 to 2012. I'm also a career coach and the founder of Key Coaching. If your transition to life back at home was anything like mine, coming back to the States after an absence of many months and for most of us years is surprisingly an unsettling business. I remember it feeling almost like waking up from a long coma. Your time as a volunteer might have wrought changes that, if you were anything like me, might have left you feeling slightly foolish, disillusioned, and possibly even out of touch. When I first returned to the States, I remember initially seeing everything as being shiny and generally easy. I remember feeling giddy with the notion that ice was no longer a luxury item and overjoyed with the discovery that a room could have more than one electrical socket. Bliss! But I also remember feeling a great deal of overwhelm. My world had been turned upside down, and most days I felt like I had more questions than answers. Now, if these feelings sound familiar to you, and if you're anything like me, many of the questions that you have currently probably revolve around jobs and careers, because let's face it, we spend most of our days and the days of our lives at work. Our jobs can be an endless grind and waste of hours spent trying to white knuckle our way through the misery until the weekend comes, or they can be a daily source of enormous joy and meaning. The choice is yours. Here are some of the questions that you might be wrestling with during your transition. How do I find a job that I enjoy, or maybe even one that I love? How do I build a career that will make me a comfortable living? How do I balance my career with my personal needs? Maybe some of you are asking, how can I make a difference in the world? Or the most pressing question that I know that we all are wrestling with, how can I be shiny and fabulously rich and famous? Over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, I hope that I can help you with all of these questions. Well, all except the last one. So sorry to disappoint. Today's world is in continual flux. We have a change-dependent economy. Companies are shifting to become more nimble by the hour. Our workforce is constantly being restructured, and we live in a culture that celebrates creativity and innovation. With this ever-moving landscape, it is becoming increasingly more critical for individuals to define their own sense of happiness and success. There is no way that our careers, given this backdrop, won't be punctuated by frequent changes, each demanding a transition from an old way of seeing things or even old identity to a new one. With these evolutions, your life will never be static, I promise you. Remember, it's not about some destination. It's not about answering one or all of these questions once and for all, and then having all be settled. To be able to navigate these uncharted waters, we need to feel equipped to reinvent our own idea of success as we change and grow personally and professionally. Now, let me take a moment to let you in on a little secret. Nobody really knows the answer to what they want to be. It's true. Even most of those box checkers, those doctors, lawyers, engineers that we know, these are just vague directions on a life path. So as we move through this module, instead of thinking about the childhood question that we have all received as kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Instead, I want you to frame this as who or what do you want to grow into next? As you reflect on this question and look to process and integrate your service experiences into your life narrative, I hope that these insights will help you to better understand your own professional identity and your own personal unique talents and interests. But most of all, I hope that some of these exercises equip you with the tools that you need to catalyze a career after your service that will lead you to a life that is generative, constantly creative, productive, changing, evolving, and most of all, one that you can someday look back on and say to yourself, now that was worthwhile. Shall we? Key number one, unpacking your bags. Reorientation. It doesn't matter where you came from, where you think you're going, what job or career you've had in the past, or the one that you think you should be moving forward towards. It's important to remind yourself about where you're at currently, while also reminding yourself that you aren't too late and you're not too early. And if you think you should already know where you're going, I'd like you to first pause, to take a step back, to recognize where you are today. If this is you, hopefully this quote helps to provide you with some perspective. Whoever in middle age attempts to realize the wishes and hopes of his early youth invariably deceives himself. Each 10 years of a person's life has its own fortunes, its own hopes, its own desires. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. As Goethe points out, our natural development pattern is not for people to keep the same dreams, but to relinquish old dreams and generate new ones throughout life. To help illustrate this, instead of viewing your career as an upward trending diagonal of increasing achievement, the traditional path that most of us are used to, I'd like you to start to view your professional trajectory as one marked by a spiral of linked circles, the completion of each leading to a new cycle or a new dream. Given the ever-evolving world that we live in, know that it is perfectly normal to keep your career in a semi-permanent state of transition, as most of us are continually creating new situations in the present, new aspirations for the future, and new ways to realize these aspirations. Now I'll warn you, this period of transition will consist of letting go of old ways and older identities. To start doing things a new way, you have to end the way you're doing them now in order to allow for the new. Now, this disruptive time of reorientation could very likely feel like empty in between space or time when everything feels up for grabs and you don't know who you are and how you're supposed to behave. But this does not mean that this time is meaningless. It's actually a very important time. So stay open to receiving cues and signs for what's to come. Think of it like this. You're simply making space for a part of you that has been waiting backstage to make its debut in your life. So with all of your service experiences, I want you to take this moment to think about what you need to eliminate in order to create this space. So I'll ask you this. What is it time to let go of in your career? Maybe it's those provisional commitments that served you in college when it made most sense to keep all of your options open. Or maybe it's your parents' expectations of what your career would look like. Feel free to journal about this further on your own. Taking stock. To understand the direction that you would like to take next, it's important to first know what you bring to the table by conducting an inventory of your talents and skills. There are 3 strategies that I recommend to engage in this process. Exercise 1, Clifton's Strengths Assessment. This is a test that you can take online that teases out what Donald Clifton's research calls your signature strengths. This is not a personality test like the Myers-Briggs test. Instead, this assessment digs into what Clifton determined were the 34 independently verifiable strengths that are related to workplace achievement and worker satisfaction. In this model, a strength is a talent, what you were born with, plus knowledge, what you have learned about the domain over time, plus skills, the experience needed to put that knowledge into action. Knowing your strengths is useful because the data is clear that people who can practice their signature strengths at work are viewed as more successful. To back this up even further, Gallup reports that people who have the opportunity to do what they do best every day are 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs and 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life. Exercise 2. Another way to determine your natural abilities is to recall specific instances when you were at your best. These can be times from your past, right, for your professional life or your personal life, and of course, any experiences that come to mind from your service. For this example, I'd like you to identify and write about 5 of these instances in a journal. Perhaps this was the last time that you were so consumed by a task that time melted. Or maybe this was an instance when you felt an extraordinary amount of internal pride, or perhaps even received public praise for an accomplishment. In each of these journal entries, I'd like you to include details around where you were, who was around you, what skills you were using, and why this was a meaningful experience to you. After you've written the entries, I'd like you to look for parallels between each of the instances. Maybe all included you working in a dynamic work setting with diverse groups of people, or maybe they involved planning or coordination for a larger event, or diving into some research to create positive change. It's really important to note the trends. Exercise 3. To take this activity a step further, I would like you to break each of these instances down by identifying the action verb of the task you are completing in each story. Maybe it was coordinating, leading, or analyzing. And then I would like you to add a noun to each of these verbs, again, based on your journal entries, to determine whether they were skills that you were using with people, ideas or data, or things. For instance, mentoring would be connected to people, while setting up a new office space would be related to things. What will result are your strongest transferable skills, and these will be your most valuable assets when it comes to making a pivot into a new field and connecting some of your service experiences to the requirements listed in the job postings that you're most interested in. Key number 2, recalibrating your compass. Now that you have a sense for what you bring to the table professionally, it is important to calibrate your compass accordingly by getting a better understanding for the direction that you hope to move in. Remember, there's no such thing as being lost. All movement is positive as long as you're moving in the right direction. One of the biggest questions that I get from clients is, but what if I don't know what I need professionally? One way to determine your current needs is to make a list of all the qualities that you have despised in previous roles. Maybe you hated working with that coworker who didn't have boundaries, or the office that didn't have windows. Here are a few other examples. After you've listed all of the qualities that you have disliked, then take these opposite descriptors for each and use this list as your guide when determining the companies and organizations that would be a better fit for you in the long run. These are examples that would fall under the people culture category. Other questions that pertain to this realm might be, what kinds of individuals have perpetually drained your energy in previous roles? Were they messy, or maybe did your boss micromanage you? What about the organizational culture? Did you despise working for that top-heavy organization, or the job that made you drink the Kool-Aid per se? It's important to note that when looking for the opposites for these characteristics, these might not be exact opposites. For instance, if you disliked being micromanaged by your last boss, the opposite wouldn't be not having supervision, but it might look like limited supervision or more autonomy. Your call. In addition to people and culture, here are a few other categories to consider with regard to your needs. Work environment, or these can be seen as your physical surroundings. What were the working conditions and surroundings that made you unhappy in the past? Maybe it was the open concept and noisy teacher's room at your school, or that job that didn't guarantee a lunch break. Another category is geography. If you're open to exploring new locations, think about all the places that you've lived in the past. What are the factors that you disliked and still do about each place? For instance, for me, before moving to my new home, I knew that I disliked gray winters and places with lots of rain. And with this realization, I knew it was important for me to only pursue places that had, say, 300 plus days of sunshine. And last but not least, salary. What is the annual income that you're aiming for? Think in terms of a range, not a single figure. The minimum would be what you would need to make to get by, which you can figure out by looking at your budget and your current expenses, while the maximum should be the number that you realistically think you could make with your current skills and experiences. Another common question that I receive from clients is, how do I know what I currently desire? Here are a few prompts to help you brainstorm what some of your biggest motivators might be. We've all been asked the question, what do you make? Often by people who have no business asking it, which always raises another important question. What do you make? Just as Einstein said, not everything can be measured counts, and not everything that counts can be measured. I couldn't agree more. I want you to think about counting your impact in different terms. How do you want to measure your fulfillment at work? Is it through income, individual expression, or impact? There's no built-in reason why you can't have it all, at least in some measure, in my mind. So to assess your own measurement of fulfillment, I'd like you to now imagine these three motivators adding up to 100 or being a whole pie. How much of your motivations are currently driven by income, individual expression? How about impact? As returned Peace Corps volunteers, I imagine that many of you are going to have some piece of your pie dedicated to meaning. If this is the case for you, I'd like you to reflect further on the specific kind of meaning that you're looking to make in this world and achieve through your work. Here are a few questions to help. If you think about the scale of your impact, are you hoping to impact others more on a personal level, say, or on a higher systemic and potentially even global scale? What about the type of impact that you're looking to have in your next role related to systems? Do you hope to fix broken systems, sustain the status quo, or do you hope to create new innovations through your work? Now that we have a better understanding of your current needs and desires, it's important to share these findings with your contacts as you look to advance your search. You never know who might be able to help. Key number 3, sharing your story. Now that you understand who you are and have more insight on the direction that you hope to move in, there's a mindset that will be critical to these next steps of your adventure. This is storytelling. When you adopt this lens, you're always looking for opportunities to reflect on your conversations and experiences, and are looking for new ways to engage the world with your story. Storytelling will become one of the primary ways you engage with others and move your career exploration and job search forward. I bet what you'll find is once you start speaking up, a funny thing will happen. The world will start talking back and telling its story in the shape of new friendships, mentors, job opportunities, maybe even creative ways to achieve your goals. Here is why I'd like you to consider this less conventional approach when making a career change. The problem with the traditional model of job searching is it requires you to look for jobs listed on the internet or corporate websites. It requires you to read the descriptions and assume they accurately describe the available jobs. And then you decide if it's a good fit. And if so, right, you submit a resume and cover letter and then wait for the hiring manager to email or call you. Then you wait and wait. Sound familiar? There are several problems with this method. First being that 52% of employers admit that they respond to less than half of the candidates who apply. This is on top of the fact that the hit rate for landing a job with the standard model is about 5%. Then it is also important to note that in the US, only 20% of jobs available are ever made public. Other studies show that recruiters have 250 resumes for every open job that they have on their desk. So instead of looking for the job postings using this traditional approach that will just keep you waiting, I'd like you to start looking for the profiles of people who you'd like to speak with instead. When you start an external job search, it can feel daunting and difficult. I know, trust me, especially when you've been abroad, to crack that network with this storytelling approach. But as long as you're curious and a sincere person who is just not coming across as someone who's looking to get a job handed to them, with the help of LinkedIn, you can become an insider through connections built by getting the story. Here are the steps that you'll need to get the story and to share your story with the right people. You might be surprised at the outcome of this non-traditional approach. If you have online profiles such as LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, review and update them. Here are some suggestions to get you started. Most importantly, create or update your LinkedIn profile with commentary about the work that you've done and details about your education, and create a profile summary that accurately reflects where you've been and where you hope to go in the future. Start building that critical network online. And remember, it's not who you know, it's who they know who might be the best audience for your story. Evaluate your connections and your personal brand, or the impression that others have of you based on your online presence. View your LinkedIn profile and any other profiles through the eyes of a target hiring manager and edit them accordingly to ensure that you're showing up in the best light as a candidate. Another way to enhance your online presence as a candidate is to start to follow and engage with some of the content of companies that you're interested in. You want to do whatever it takes to demonstrate your thought leadership. And as a bonus, your LinkedIn feed will also be tailored to these interests. Now, once you find the right people to have this conversation with, or what some call an informational interview with, it's important to have your elevator pitch ready and to prepare accordingly. To be effective with your introduction, your elevator pitch needs to share enough about who you are and what you do that the other person remains interested and the conversation ensues. This should include your name, what you did most recently, which for many of you will include the nature of your service. Just whatever you do, don't assume that the other person understands what CBT is. Be careful. And then something interesting about you, or the reasons why you're interested in this particular kind of work, and then what you're looking to do next. An example of this could be, my name is John Doe. I spent the last 2 years serving as an education volunteer in the Peace Corps, training secondary teachers on student-centered instructional methodologies in a remote district in Malawi. The work was meaningful to me because I'm passionate about service and educational equity. Right now, I'm pursuing full-time opportunities that would allow me to leverage my skills in curriculum development as a consultant stateside. Hopefully this is a helpful starting point for you. Whatever you do, have fun with it. Most of all, it's critical to do your research on the person that you're planning to speak with ahead of time. At the very least, you need to review their LinkedIn profile and any other professional details that are available online that would be helpful for you to know. Based on their experiences, prepare a few questions that you'd like to ask them about their work. Here are some of my go-tos. How did you land your role as X with company Y? What has been one key to your professional success thus far? What is one thing that you wished you knew moving into this field? What advice do you have for someone in my position? And then, only if their organization interests you, what steps would be involved in exploring how someone like me might become part of your organization? Once you've had the caller meeting, know that the follow-up is critical. If you do nothing else, circle back to your interviewee with appreciation and any deliverables that you promised. Add any personal details that would be helpful here. Did you take their advice to reach out to that contact that they suggested? Did you sign up for that course? They want to know if their guidance helped you. And more often than not, if they took 20 to 30 minutes of their time to speak with you, they truly care. Again, if you are sincere and curious, you might be pleasantly surprised at the traction you gain just by sharing your story and where some of these conversations might lead you as a candidate. Throughout this module, I've shared with you tools and ideas that will help you to hopefully catalyze a career change that counts. As a career coach, I can say with an informed confidence that those that I've worked with over the years who have implemented these tools and ideas have made real professional and personal progress in the ways that none of them had ever experienced before. And while there's no such thing as the perfect job, I do believe that each of us has the potential to find a career that will be good enough, one that will strike the right balance and provide a unique life that will be impactful and fulfilling to each of us in the long run. In closing, I'll leave you with a few words from my favorite poet, Mary Oliver. Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. Life's too short to be disengaged at work, folks, and our time on this planet is certainly too precious to be uninspired at life. If you have questions or are looking for additional support, you can find me here at www.key-coaching.com and in these other places online too. I truly do hope that we stay connected, as I would love to hear your story.